So today I'm going to field probably the most common question I get from friends, family, clients, anybody from out of state is, how do you deal with the heat? Isn't it hotter than hell down there? How do people survive? And that might be the thing in the back of your mind that you're wondering about before you decide whether or not you want to move here. Maybe you got a job offer and you're like, man, I don't know. Will I be able to survive? Is it going to be too hot? Will my kids survive? Will my dogs survive? And we're going to break this down. I think you're going to be surprised at the answer that I come up with today. Is Arizona hotter than hell? Yes, but it's a dry heat. And so you see that all the time at the truck stops. It's like an old joke. We're going to dig into what that actually means and why people say that, okay? So we want to narrow the question down to when and where. Nobody's wondering how spring break is survivable. Everybody comes here for spring break. They vacation here. So what most people mean when they ask the question, how do you survive the hottest months, right? Which is July and August. Well, let's break that down, but then also where, because if you're asking about whether or not I can survive in this photo, this is Flagstaff. This is 2 hours from Phoenix, right? It's a very different world up there. If you go out to the East Mountains, it'll be 30 degrees cooler in some spot. To narrow the question, we're gonna say, is it hotter than hell in July in Phoenix? Well, we need to define what is too hot, right? What does that actually mean? Some people think that it's too hot when it's 80. Some people don't think it's too hot until it gets over 100. And then the people down here that don't think it's too hot until it's like over 105, 110, right? So that's pretty relative. But let's break that down just a little bit scientifically of what that actually means physiologically. So we're going to look at the National Weather Service's heat index. What they do is they actually look at the heat index, which measures not only temperature, but also the humidity. So you might be thinking, well, yeah, humidity sucks because you sweat more, right? But it's more than that. So I want you to think about what it feels like when you go into a sauna. So a lot of saunas can be 120, they can be 140. But then your hot tub, right? Your hot tub only goes up to 104. So what would happen if your hot tub was at 120? Well, you'd burn yourself. You'd bake yourself. It would not be good, right? So manufacturers limit your hot tub to 104. That's because you're actually in the water. And so the best way that I can describe this is that the more humidity you have, the more it's like being in a hot tub. Okay, the more water. So humidity is just the water in the air. So the more water on you, or the more you're wearing the heat, is going to be what it feels like. So you can see here that with the heat index, they have caution at 80 to 90. Right? Extreme caution from 90 to 103. And this is heat index. This isn't temperature. It doesn't say temperature up there. And then it's dangerous up to 124, and then over 125, it's like you're going to have a heat stroke, right? So that's where the body starts to shut down, is in the 120s. So physiologically, it gets too hot when the heat index is at 120, right? So how do we get to that, right? You might be asking, well, what does that actually mean? Well, it's not as simple as just temperature, right? So if we look at temperature, say it's a 96 degree day, okay? So we're up here, we're at the 96 degree day right here, and it is 75% humidity, right? So say you're in the south, it's 96 July, and the humidity is 70%, 75%. Well, guess what? You are in the extreme danger of the heat index at 132. Okay, so that's pretty interesting, and this is going to be the basis for a lot of the things that we're going to go off of here pretty soon. But you have to realize that when you look at the temperature in Phoenix from your house in Mississippi or your house in Seattle with 70% humidity, and you see that it's 120 or 115 in Phoenix, and you think people must be dying. If it's 110 degrees in Phoenix, you're usually going to assume your humidity there, right? And you can't do that. We're going to talk about that in a second. So this is from NOAA, NOAA, but you can see that the majority of the United States, right? So that means 56 to 75% relative humidity. Phoenix and the Death Valley are a very, very special place that have a low relative humidity that most people don't have any experience with, and so we have to bring that up when we talk about, is it too hot in Phoenix? I'll give it to you guys, yes, it's too hot in July in Phoenix. It gets too hot. but it's not as hot as you might think, right? And you might be thinking, oh, you've just lived there forever, or maybe you didn't have a bad summer, or the last thing I want to do is convince somebody to move here that's gonna leave. I would consider that a failure. So the one thing I have to tell you guys is this last summer was the hottest summer we had on record. In 2023, we had 55 days over 110 degrees. That is brutal. Last year was half that, less than half that. 2020 was less than half that. 2020 was 23, but you can see that that is not common. So I'm coming off a brutal year. We had months where it was over 110, okay? So I want you to know that I'm not being biased here. I'm not trying to convince people or twist people's arm. I'm just merely trying to be honest. I grew up in the Northwest where the hottest day we would ever see is like 100. And I live here now. I just went through this summer and it was hot. I'm gonna give that to you. It was hot and it did get old. One of the things you want to look for if you're buying a house is what are the engineered solutions to dealing with the weather for these few months that are miserable. Air conditioning, shade, mist, going on vacation, and pools. So let's break those down. So when you buy a house, you're going to want to pay attention to where is the south wall. The south wall gets the most hot sun of the day. So whatever is south, like if your backyard is facing south, you're going to probably want to put some shade up or figure out how to be able to put some shade up. So the radiant heat of the sun makes all of the difference. In the summertime, you really want to figure out shade. The next one is misters, right? So a lot of people have misters down here. When you go to restaurants or when you're at a coffee shop, you'll see that they have the misters going in the summer, right? That's a great solution. The other one is vacation. A lot of people leave. If you think about it, if you're from the Northwest and your best weather is in the summer, you don't really need to leave in the summer. Like, that's the best weather you get all year. You earned it, you waited, you sat through the rain, and here you are enjoying it. But that's not the case in Phoenix. In Phoenix, all year is beautiful, and then summer comes, your kids are off school or you're out of school, and then you can leave. It's perfect, right? So think about that. So you got great weather all year, and then when it gets miserable, you could take off for a few weeks or a month or whatever. A lot of people go up to Flagstaff, a lot of people go to San Diego, and a lot of people will go back home, wherever that might be. One of the other big ones is pools. You'll fly over the Phoenix Valley and you'll look down and you'll be like, everybody has a pool. Well, guess what? Not everybody has a pool, but a lot of people have pools. But it's not as many as you think. The percentage of homes that I look at or that I show and see that don't have pools is actually kind of surprising. Coming from the Northwest, I assumed everybody would have a pool down here, and it's just not the case. People get used to it. Having a pool adds a huge value. I think in the summertime with a pool, you can drop your core body temperature like that. It's wonderful in the mornings to get up and go for a swim. And then the last thing to think about is going to be AC. Now, when you buy a house, you're going to have air conditioning down here, right? That's the equivalent of having heat, like if you're from the Midwest. Like, you have to have heat, otherwise you don't survive. In Arizona, you have to have AC, otherwise you don't survive. So figure that out before you make your purchase. So I look at a lot of homes, and there's still a lot of homes that were built down here right prior to the great financial crisis, back in 2005, 6, 7, and they still have their original AC unit from 2005, 6, or 7. Okay, that makes me nervous. So anytime I have a buyer and they have a home that has 2 different air conditioning units that are that old, that could easily be a $15,000 bill. If you buy this house, your AC units go out in the middle of summer when you moved, and you're just stuck with this surprise $15,000 bill. That is significant. I think a lot of realtors down here don't want to talk about that when it's their listing. They try and minimize it like it's not a big deal. It's a huge deal. Now, can you predict when an AC unit's going to go out? No, but there is a lifespan, and if you talk to any HVAC technician, they'll give you their idea of what they think the lifespan of a unit's going to be. And let me tell you what, these units do go out. It happens all the time, and then these guys have to put in an emergency AC unit. You don't want that to happen. Solve that problem before it happens. If you're working with me, and we have an old AC unit, we're gonna see what our options are with the seller. It depends a little bit on the brand, it depends a little bit on how well they've serviced it, it depends on the efficiency and how well it's operating. Those are all factors that can help you make a good choice, but don't forget to check that out. Making that mistake can cost you as much as a roof in some instances, so just make sure that that's something that you take a look at and you consider. We've decided, yes, the summer in Phoenix in July is too hot, but what does it actually feel like? Okay, so I want to give you guys the ability to try and feel, or I want to give you guys the ability to understand what it's like to experience the Phoenix heat. Okay, so we looked at the humidity index, and so what I thought I would do is let's take some of the more common hot places people vacation to and calculate the relative humidity and the temperature using the National Weather Service's heat index, and we will give a comparison of what you might be used to or what you might have felt. We're picking Miami, Houston, LA, Orlando, Phoenix, and Honolulu, okay? Because those are just popular spots. Assume average highs, but we're going to assume the highest relative humidity because I want to show you how much the humidity affects things. And then we're going to compare that to the Phoenix Mesa area, okay? So let's do this. So let's take a look. So if you look at Houston, top of the charts here at 93 degrees in Houston and an 85% relative humidity, you were at 197. So I don't know if I believe that. I kind of question that. It seems like on that end of the scale, this heat index kind of loses its validity. Maybe not, but that's what the number came out as. I played with it a few times just to see if that was accurate, but yeah, that's what it spit out. So then we're gonna go over to Orlando. So a lot of people go to Orlando, they go to Disney World. So the common or the average high in Orlando in July is gonna be 92. A high RH in Orlando is gonna be 75. And that puts you at a heat index reading of 121 degrees. Now we're gonna look at Honolulu, right? It's in Hawaii, it's on the Pacific, it's beautiful. You might be thinking, oh, it never gets too hot there, right? Well, even at 89 degrees in Honolulu, right, they're surrounded by the Pacific, so it's never gonna get like too hot temperature-wise, but it's humid, and so that humidity bumps that 89 degrees up to 103. So if you have 70% relative humidity, then it's going to feel like 103 in Honolulu, which is a beautiful spot. Let's go to LA. So LA's, a lot of people have been to LA. Average high in the summer is 84, which seemed low to me, but that's what it came out as, with a 70% relative humidity, which seemed high to me, but that's what I found in my research. But that put a heat index at 91 degrees. One of the highest relative humidity vacation destinations was Miami. And so Miami with a 90% relative humidity at 91 degrees comes out at 121. And then you look at Mesa over here, and you can see that Arizona, so Mesa is right next to Phoenix. So for Mesa, the average high is going to be 105 degrees. Okay, that seems low, especially for this year, but that's just the data. It's the historical data. As the average high in July is 105. So, like we showed in that map, it's in this pocket of really low humidity that ranges from 20 to 30% relative humidity. So on the high end, if you have a 105 degree day in Mesa and it's 30% relative humidity, then you are at 111 on the heat index. If it's 20% relative humidity, then we're only at 104. The temperature actually goes down if you get below the 20s. Let's look at my weather app right now and I'll show you guys. I don't know if you can see that, but it's at 9%, okay? So it's actually so low that the temperature outside feels cooler on the heat index than it actually reads on a thermometer, which is wild. And that's where people say, hey, but it's a dry heat. I wanted to back myself up with some other people's thoughts, so I did a little bit of research, and you can find a ton of this online. He's asking Arizona versus Florida in the summer, which is worse, okay? So this guy is pretty funny, but he concludes, I'd choose the desert heat over feeling like walking in a puddle of sweat in Florida. Florida, this next guy. Florida is easily the worst, not even close. Humidity changes everything. This next person. Yep, I took a vacation to Albuquerque and loved not sweating to death in 100 degrees. Florida, at least sweat works in the desert, except perhaps when the monsoon hits. Florida, in my opinion. So typically the humid summers in Florida will feel worse, but it gets worse. But it gets to a point here in Phoenix, over 115, can't tell the difference. And so you can just see that over and over and over, people are saying it is worse in the humidity than in the dry heat. So here's the summary of all of that and the relative humidity. I think this is really interesting. You know, I'll give it to you guys that yes, it does get too hot in Arizona in the summer, but as you can see, it gets too hot in a lot of places that people go to in the summer. So I just wanted to put it in sort of relative terms. So Phoenix comes in somewhere between Orlando and Honolulu as how hot it actually feels when you calculate humidity. The last thing I feel like I have to say when it comes to all this, physiology might be part of it, right? I've always been somebody that I enjoy the heat and I would much rather be warm than cold. I've always liked being able to be outside. I've always liked being able to do things outside. And so I would gladly trade 3 months that are hot for 8 months that are raining. The other one is your body mass index. So the bigger you are, the more miserable you're gonna be, right? So if you're a bigger person, you got more insulation, you're gonna feel hotter. And then it's just preferences, you know, like what are you into? What do you like doing? If you're an inside person and you like to read books, you'll do great in the Northwest, right? But if you're an outside person, you're just gonna sit there and stare out the window depressed and sad because it's just raining and miserable and cold and you can't do anything because it's muddy, dark, and wet. So, and then the last thing, it's like, are you planning on having a pool or not, right? So that's something to think about. Of like, you know, if you're a water person, you're gonna love it down here because you can always go in the water. To conclude this and to kind of sum everything up, when we say, is it too hot in Arizona? We're gonna be honest, we're gonna say yeah, but it's not as hot as everywhere. And then we're also going to say there's some things you can do about it, right? So then what do you do? So if you're sitting there, you're watching this video and you're like, okay, Greg, you convinced me that I'm not as scared of the Arizona summers as I was 10 minutes ago. Well, here's the best advice I have. Come check it out. Come out in July, come out in August, and just see what it's like. And I'll be honest, you can go pretty much anywhere on vacation and have a great time. So, you know, if you're staying somewhere in Scottsdale with a pool, it doesn't matter if it's 120 degrees. You're sitting by a pool, having, you know, cocktails or iced tea, it's gonna be great, right? So I wanna encourage you guys, that's probably the best thing that I could say is check out the places that you're interested in moving to before you go there, and check them out in the worst times, right? So try it out, travel to other places, and then if you can, try and find, if you're worried about it, find something with some pool access. That's the best thing that I could say. You can get pool access through some of the gyms down here. So like the one that comes to mind is Lifetime Fitness. They have these amazing outdoor pools. So that would be one option, or you try and find a place that either the HOA has a pool, or maybe you try and find a house with a pool, which would be the ultimate. And so those are all things to think about. The last thing I would say about when you're looking at property, figure out the AC situation. Have a technician be honest with you. A good HVAC guy can measure the efficiency of how well something's operating. That's worth doing. Like I said, that's easily a $10,000 to $20,000 problem. Do not let a bad realtor talk you out of that. Like you need to figure that out and know what you're getting into. And it's something that I will always fight for. If it looks like an AC unit's not going to work, to me, that makes the house unlivable. That's not something that can fly. I would never have a client buy a home where the AC unit is not operating correctly without dealing with that and getting some seller concessions. So lastly, buy some sunglasses and a hat, right? So the sun, if you're moving to Arizona and you're coming here, you're gonna spend a lot of time outside. So get yourself a good hat, get some good sunglasses, and enjoy it and make the most of it. Thanks Thanks for watching this video. I hope it was helpful. If it added any value to you, like or subscribe. I'd love to hear your thoughts, the things I missed, the things you don't agree with, in the comments below. Throw them out there. And I appreciate you guys. Have a wonderful day. Take care.